The things don't all happen the day after a general election, and that was clear from my conference speech, and it's clear now.
We've been arguing not that you solve the budget deficit in 1 year miraculously in 2010 or 2011, but you've got to make a start in 2010. The government are not proposing to make a start at all. The danger of inaction is far, far greater. I mean, if we don't take steps to deal with the deficit, that's when we could see interest rates go up, mortgage rates go up, and not just a double dip, but actually a downward spiral.
David Cameron and George Osborne are old friends who've been the closest of collaborators in steering the Tory party towards victory.
He's brilliant.
In government, it's inevitable that there will be the most acute tensions in their relationship. Most prime ministers fall out with their chancellors sooner or later. That friendship is likely to be tested to breaking point. You and David Cameron are famously good friends. How are you going to stop your relationship going the same way as that between Tony Blair and Gordon Brown?
First of all, I'm not sure that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown never fundamentally liked each other. I mean, they were political allies, whereas David and I are good personal friends. Second, Gordon Brown wanted to be the party leader. I didn't want to be the party leader. I wanted David Cameron to be the party leader.
George Osborne will have an eye, no doubt, on his own political future, and to that extent, they will be rivals as well as colleagues.
The San Andreas fault of British politics runs right between number 10 and number 11. That is where governments fracture.
The most common causes of earthquakes in Downing Street are tax and spending. The Conservatives are committed to massive reductions to the budgets of the police, education and transport. It's surely not credible that this can be achieved without hurting frontline services.
I don't accept that. The whole Conservative argument, the whole modern Conservative argument, is that you need structural reform to public services to increase their productivity so we get more for less. So I think you can improve the way these services are delivered and live within our means as a country. These are not incompatible things.
And when it's suggested, as it is sometimes by politicians, that you can have the public spending reductions being envisaged and not in any way affect frontline services, is that believable?
I don't think it's believable. It's clear that frontline services are going to be in for a very mean, lean time. That the freeze on public sector pay, which, if it's fair, I think has got to be more or less without exemptions and exceptions, could well last quite a long time, either as a freeze or as years of great restraint.
If you look at the overall budget of the Department of Children, Schools and Families, it is clear that you can reduce the budget of that department without affecting frontline services, and crucially, you can reduce the budget of that department without affecting the money that goes to schools.
You can't keep the same level of services publicly funded as are currently running. It's easy to say you get rid of waste. Everybody will get rid of waste. But in the end, people notice that there aren't the services they previously had.
Two departments have been given an exemption from cuts: overseas aid and health. These promises are designed to allay public anxieties about the Tories. But a man who has run the Treasury says this can only mean even deeper spending cuts elsewhere.
How far can you really exempt a service even as big as the health service? What do you do about the costs of the criminal justice system, police, prisons, etc.? Very difficult to that this is done solely by efficiency, back office systems and so on.
It's not acceptable, actually, just to say there's one large chunk of the public services have just got to be left alone and we take an axe to everything else. That doesn't make sense.
And will George Osborne be able to persuade the Cabinet that they've got to take the knife to their budgets? Even before they've reached power, his senior colleagues are already preparing their arguments for why he should make an exception for them. What are you going to offer by way of cuts from the Foreign Office?
Funnily enough, the Foreign Office has already had a huge cut because of the incompetence of current Foreign Office ministers who agreed to the exchange rate risk being taken by the Foreign Office, not by the Treasury. And the result of that, since the exchange rate then fell off a cliff, was that they've already had a cut of about 15% in the Foreign Office.
Are you saying there'll be no further cuts to the Foreign Office budget?
No, I'm not saying that because I don't know until I get there and examine it what inefficiencies may still remain. But I would say you can take this as an early bid in these in any such spending negotiations. The Foreign Office, unfortunately for our diplomatic effort overseas, has already had a pretty swingeing reduction.
And the man who wants to be Defence Secretary is equally resistant to cuts in his budget.
One of the problems that's unique to the defence budget is that we don't know what the commitments are within that budget. We don't know in equipment programmes, for example, where penalty clauses exist and what we're committed to unavoidably. So really until we get into office, we'll not have a very clear view of that budget.
A former Conservative Chancellor, now on David Cameron's top team, says they will have to move quickly before spending ministers are captured by their civil servants.
I have been through more public spending rounds than most people have had hot dinners. New ministers are keenly supporting what they've just been elected on, and they haven't been nobbled by their departments yet. There's a certain human nature in it.
George Osborne has devised a new weapon. It will, he hopes, address cabinet resistance and public mistrust. He plans to set up an invigilator, the Office for Budget Responsibility. At its head will be Sir Alan Budd.
The idea for the Office for Budget Responsibility, as far as I am aware, is George Osborne's. The question of bringing down the deficit is, of course, up to the government. It won't be up to this office. But what they're doing is watching what the government is up to, what it's saying the figures are.
If the Office of Budget Responsibility were to take a view the Chancellor or the government as a whole were behaving recklessly, what sanction would you have?
I don't think there will be a sanction. What there will be is the extreme embarrassment to the Chancellor. You'll know that this office is a success when the Conservative government, if it's elected, wishes it had never set it up.
I mean, it's only the power to embarrass you by saying, I don't believe the Treasury's projections. I mean, he won't actually have any other power to rein you in, will he?
No, he'll have... You misunderstand the importance of the Office for Budget Responsibility. The Office for Budget Responsibility will produce the borrowing forecast for the country, the growth forecast. There won't be the Chancellor's forecast. There won't be the Chancellor fiddling the forecasts to fit his plans. It'll be this independent body telling the whole of Britain what the state of our national accounts are.
Not only will there be deep cuts to spending, two distinguished advisers to the Tories believe that a Conservative government will find it near impossible to avoid putting up taxes too.
It's going to be very difficult indeed to achieve the kinds of cut in deficit that will be needed without some increases in the general level of taxation. It just doesn't seem to me possible to do it all on the public spending side.
I'd be very surprised if both blades of the scissors aren't working extremely hard.
So taxes will have to go up as well?
Almost certainly.
Many experts think, such is the state of the public finances, you'll not only have to cut spending, you'll have to put up taxes. They're right, aren't they?
Well, we've never ruled out tax rises. The day I took this job in 2005, I didn't rule out tax rises, and indeed the very first economic speech that David Cameron gave as party leader, he didn't rule out tax rises.
The Tories are instinctively a low-tax party. It will be very uncomfortable for them to jack taxes up. The Tory who runs London is already protesting.
It cannot be right that we try to compete with other big, powerful trading nations with a top rate of tax significantly higher than theirs. We need to remember the importance of attracting wealth creators to London. The testosterone-fueled, risk-addicted, bonus-hungry, there they are. That's absolutely right. But the tax that they generated, as private equity and hedge funds, is enough to pay for 200,000 nurses, or 165,000 teachers, or the entire Olympic budget.
For the first year, perhaps two, of the Cameron government, he and George Osborne may be able to blame spending cuts and tax rises on the deficit bequeathed to them by Labour. If the Tory remedy is effective, then the country may be thankful. But if the Tory medicine doesn't work, worse, if it puts the economy back into intensive care, then they take the risk that they will rapidly become one of the most unpopular governments of all time. Standing on the threshold of Number 10 the morning after the election, Prime Minister Cameron pledged to make a priority of fixing what he called broken Britain. This had been a consistent theme in opposition. The Tory leader sums up his philosophy in one neat phrase.
There is such a thing as society. It's just not the same thing as the state.
I understand that was Samantha's suggestion. She heard him speaking, knew what he believed, and said, what you're actually saying is this. And that he said, that's right.
It's a dig at Margaret Thatcher, really, because Margaret Thatcher said there's no such thing as society. Now, David Cameron says there is such a thing as society.
The big idea is this. Charities, along with other voluntary and independent groups, are often better than government at delivering projects to improve society. They will step up as the state is rolled back. David Cameron talent-spotted a lawyer from Yorkshire, put her in the House of Lords and gave her the task of putting more flesh on the idea.
That's why I am proud that I can stand here with the first Muslim woman in a shadow cabinet or cabinet in Saeeda Varsi, who will be a great talent for our party and for our country.
The whole social action agenda was something that David was driving, and actually he gave me shadow cabinet responsibility to drive it forward. There was a lot of eye rolling. I remember you'd speak to traditional Conservatives and they'd kind of say, is this some new fad that's come out of central office? And they found this, young girl from Yorkshire to come along and tell us how great it is.
If you hope voluntary organisations and charities are going to do more things, that means they're going to be given taxpayers' money. Now, they have to be accountable for that.